About ready to live stream. Don't think it's going yet, but hi everybody on YouTube in case you're there. We're about to have an exciting episode with Isobel and Kushla. Fantastic. Well, hi everybody, welcome to Pushing the Limits. Today I am doing something very unusual, and hi to everybody in YouTube land who's listening to this as well. I want to introduce my best friend, Kushla Young. Kushla, welcome to the show.
Thanks,
for starters. Now Kushla, to give you guys a bit of background, Kushla and I have been friends for, a decade or so. And Kushla is the lady that helped me write this book. Without her, it would not exist. It was a complete muck-up before Kushla came along. The book is Relentless, How a Mother and Daughter Defied the Odds. That's my latest book. And Kushla is the magic behind that book. So what we're going to be doing today is talking about what the book is about, which is the story of bringing my mum back from a massive aneurysm, major brain damage at the age of 74. When it was against all the odds, when the medical professionals were telling me the brain damage is so bad that she's never going to recover. And being an athlete, I went, no, that's not happening and we'll find a way. And this is going to be all about that story. Now, I'm going to hand over to the reins to Kushla to actually interview me, but I've actually got a very, very special guest sitting here next to me, who is the actual star of the show. And so Kushla is she's got to take off for a coffee date. So I'll have to let her come to word first. So I'm going to pass you over to my very special mummy. There she is, Isobel. And she's going to talk to Kushla for a second. So I'll just pass over the headphones.
Hand over the rein.
Now we're on, Isobel.
Okay.
Hi, Isobel. Morning.
Good morning, Kushla. How are you?
Are you off for a coffee date soon, are you?
Yes. Just up the road.
So you are our guest of honour for a few minutes on this podcast. This is going to be a little bit different because I get to interview your daughter rather than her interview others today.
Oh, that's good.
But we'll start with you. So you have been on one heck of a journey over the last few years.
I sure have.
Can we start with how you're feeling now?
I'm feeling good. Yeah.
You're looking great.
I can go off for a coffee and I can go walking on my own and I can do almost everything.
Mm-hmm. And when Isobel left my house after a lovely glass of wine the other day, you you didn't have one, but Lisa did. You drove, didn't you? You drove her home?
I did. Yeah.
So,
I can drive now, and that's good, especially if Lisa's having a wine.
You get to be a mum.
I do. Revert back to being mum.
Yeah. And that must have given you a lot of independence that you have lost for quite a few years.
Yes, it was. It was awesome. Awesome. You don't realise how isolated people are if they haven't got wheels,
right?
or a way of getting around. Yeah, it is isolating. Yeah.
And can you tell us a bit about what you have been getting up to? I understand you've been doing some art classes with your sister, and how's that going?
Not as well as I would like, but we're doing all right, you know.
Yeah.
I'd like the results to be a bit more spectacular, but
it must be nice to be creative.
Oh, it is. It's good. It does me good too.
Now, do you have much of a memory of the hospital time?
No.
What's your first memory that you can kind of recall?
Probably where we went to a meeting with all the big guns and at the hospital, and they wrote me off, really.
Did they? They underestimated you, Isobel.
They did. And I can remember saying,
I was feeling good. You were feeling good before.
Yeah, I was feeling fine before this. Now I'm feeling terrible.
Right.
I have been demoted. I've been, lost my independence.
Yeah.
And just because they were talking like they were, they shouldn't have done that.
They took away all your confidence, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. And so your background is similar to mine. You're an educator.
Yeah.
Have been for decades and decades.
Mm-hmm.
And you must understand how demotivating it is when somebody tells you what you can't do rather than
what you can do.
Yeah.
That's it exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when did it change for you after that meeting? What were some of the first things that happened that gave you a bit more confidence?
Driving.
Getting a driver's license probably was a major breakthrough.
Yeah.
Lisa took me down to the down by the port and just
spent months.
Hopped out of the
going
car.
round and round, didn't you?
Yeah, and said, "Sure, your wheel now. You drive." And I was totally gobsmacked.
But you did it.
I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I understand the doctor was utterly shocked.
He was.
When you went in to get your medical for your license.
Yeah, he was totally blown away.
Yeah.
So it was good. It was really nice to blow away a doctor.
It had probably been a while since the doctor had responded that way.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. He was a nice doctor, so it was good.
So if you could give some advice to someone who might be going through something pretty tough at the moment, what would you say to them?
Just hang in there and fight hard. Yeah. You've got to grit your teeth and just carry on, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're one tough lady, aren't you?
I must be.
You are, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we did.
Mm-hmm. And can you describe some of the routines of things that you do at the moment that keep you in such good health?
I go to the gym most days.
Mm-hmm.
I
do weight training.
I do. Yeah,
cardio.
I do weights. I do cardio. I do walking on the treadmill, yoga.
And you still do hyperbaric as well?
Yes, every day at the moment.
Every day. Wonderful. Yeah. And still eat the smoothies that Lisa makes you in the mornings?
Yes, they're pretty terrible.
But they're good for you, right?
But they are good for me. Broccoli is not exciting in a smoothie. But
what we've noticed, Isobel, over even the last 6 months is how fit and agile and glowing that you are, and that's amazing.
It is amazing. It's amazing that you said that. I don't always feel it,
right?
But, it's hard to know where you're at. So
yeah. I think sometimes if you see yourself reflected in others' eyes, that's a really good indication of how far you've come.
Yeah, and I have come a long way.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, a really long way.
Bloody long way. Right, we'll let you go for your coffee.
I'll pass you back to Lisa, and
I've got a coffee date.
And enjoy.
I will.
Thanks, Mummy.
Okay.
She's an absolute legend.
Isn't she?
Thanks. You have a nice coffee. Well, now we're actually going to get into her backstory because, and I would have done it the other way around and had her at the end of the show, but she needed to get to her coffee date. So we're just rolling. Yeah, we're rolling with the punches here. But Kushla, I'm going to pass the reins over to you fully because you know the story. You lived it with me. You helped me from the get-go pretty much. So over to you. I'm now the interviewee. Oh,
we're flipping the tables, aren't we?
Yeah, we sure are.
You get to be interviewed for once, which is fabulous. So this has been a long journey for you and your mum and your family. And you're right. I had known you for a few years before this happened. And I think from my perspective, the thing that was so shocking about what originally with your aneurysm with your mum was just how quick things changed overnight.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we see Isobel now, and I mean, how old is
She's
Mum?
79.
79.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're going back quite a few years, and I used to often pop into the shop and see your mum, and just pop in and say hello. And she is now, but she also was then, a very intelligent, clear-spoken woman that used to do acro aerobics all the time. She was very fit and healthy, very independent, working still pretty much full time.
Yeah, she was.
And for somebody watching, to see overnight that she went from a completely functioning full-time working adult to just being nothing was there, you know, overnight the aneurysm took her from you know, being completely functional to nothing. And I think the shock in that first visit, and I saw her quite a few weeks after the aneurysm when you came back up to New Plymouth after you'd been in Wellington, and so the shock of seeing her lying there, she had aged a decade overnight. And it's hard to see. And I think the shock of that must have ripped through your family quite viciously, you know, to see that change overnight.
It was huge. To have your, you know, like, you know, I'd grown up with mum being always the one supporting me, the one that was, you know, there for me in all the phases of my crazy, you know, upside down life that I've had, you know, with all my adventures, supporting me with all the, you know, dramas and relationship breakups and divorces and business.
Brewing for you on most of your races.
Oh yes, you know, she'd seen been there, done that with me. They can tell you that she had a hard life with me, and she had a good life. You know, she had exciting times with me, and she was really, you know, the rock of my world. And then that turned upside down very much overnight. And you know, you go from being this adult kid to a complete role reversal where you're now, you know, having to do everything for your mum. You are advocating, you're fighting, you grow up really quickly. Even though I was a, you know, fully grown adult, obviously, I was still very much, when you've got a parent, you still like a kid, you know, in a way to them. And that was the biggest shocker for me, I think, was to be, no, now you are the one that's caring for your mum, and you are going to have to pull out all the stops to help her. And it's, you know, no longer about you being the selfish, egoistical athlete. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you have to be if you want to reach, you know, do the stuff that I did. But that was a shocker. And then, not, you know, like we had medical mishaps from the very get-go. You know, when mum had this aneurysm, it happened early in the morning, and an ambulance driver, you know, came into the house. You know, they got her into the ambulance up to the hospital. He knew already that she was having a neurological event, and he told the doctor so much, and he just ignored it. He ignored it. He said, no, she's having a migraine, I think, so we'll just leave her for a few hours and observe her and give her some painkillers. Well, you know, thanks very much for that. Because we sat there for 6 hours not knowing. And she was dying, basically. She was dying. And I knew she was in deep trouble, and I didn't know what to do, because at that point in my life, I had no idea of anything like this. I was never, you know, in a situation like this. I didn't know what was wrong with her, but I knew we were in trouble. And that was a very big wake-up call. I actually got our mutual friend, Megan Stewart, who's a paramedic here and the head of the ambulance here, and she came up to the hospital at that time, and she sort of rattled some bloody cages very quickly. And because she knew immediately what was happening, you know, stroke or aneurysm or something neurological. And she went and told this doctor what for. And he then relented, and we got a CT scan, and that's when we saw the blood right throughout the brain. So that was a very a big wake-up call for me in a number of ways. Obviously, the shock of that happening to your mum, the fear of her dying. She's been very, very, very close to death at this point. And then realizing that the medical system had not worked for us, you know, already. And I'm not you know, we're all human and we all make mistakes and stuff, but that was a pretty big one. It was a pretty big one.
I think in those situations, you know, we want to trust the people that are, you know, the medical professionals that are around us, and for the most part in ED, you know, they're an amazing you know, group of people.
Yeah.
But I think also there is a lot to be said for, you know, your mum, you knew what a migraine looked like. She'd had it before. And it's a matter of trusting yourself, isn't it, enough to then think this isn't what they're saying, and to question, and to then fight as hard as you can for, you know, for a different outcome. Because my understanding about aneurysm is there's a golden hour, or it's really important to get treatment within,
exactly, like
with a very short time frame.
Surgery, you know, that's the golden sort of hour. They talk about getting you into surgery within the hour. And it took 18 hours. It took 18 hours because not only did we have the medical mishap, then we also had the fact that we had to get to our, you know, main hospital down in Wellington for neurological. And living in a regional area, you know, unfortunately that's just the way it is. But we had to wait another 12 hours for the air ambulance to actually get to us. And when you're over 65, you sort of bump down the hierarchy, especially if you they don't think you're a good, you know, got good odds. So, you know, there were at that time, like we had a baby that needed help, and that was more urgent than mum. And you know, they have to make those calls. So I understand that. I don't like it. I understand it. When it's your loved one, you don't really get it.
No, not at the time, because you're also going through the shock of what's happening, and trying to process that. In that moment, can you describe? I suppose I want to focus a little bit on what was happening to you and your kind of body, and because I think the thing about this Relentless story is that it's not just about a mum surviving an aneurysm, but it's also about you and your family, and how you've managed to pull yourself back together as well. So not just Isobel, but yourself. And I know that a lot of us, or all of us, will face a moment in our lives where we have to handle a bit of trauma. And what was going on in your body, and how did you cope so that you had the ability to fight for your mum? So what were you doing in your mind at the time?
So in the initial phases, Kushla, you know, you are in shock, you're terrified, but very, very quickly, especially after the mishap, once I realized what had just happened, and the balls up that was, and that it was likely going to cost your life, I just went into what I call mission mode. You know, like, okay, right, I'm going to research the hell out of this. I'm going to learn everything I can. I'm going to be hyper vigilant. I'm going to watch everything they do. I'm going to question everything they do. I'm going to get my family organized, because I had to get them down to Wellington. My father was, of course, you know, falling to pieces. This is the love of his life. He's been, you know, married to her for 55 years. And he came up to me already in the ED and said, we better start planning the funeral, because they were, you know, saying to us, she's like unlikely to survive. And I'm like, Dad, we're not even considering that. She is alive, she's still breathing, and we're going to fight with everything we have. And here's a list of jobs to do. I want you to go and ring so-and-so, organize this, get the boys down, my brothers down to Wellington, blah, blah, blah. When people are in a crisis, you need to take control and give them jobs to do, so that their amygdala, their primitive part of the brain, doesn't go into complete full-blown panic, and which, you know, doesn't always work. And I'll relay a story a little bit later where I did go into full-blown panic. And so it's all very well and good to say this, but at that point in time, I was like, Dad, I shook him, I grabbed him, I held him, and I said, no, you've got this and this job to do. We're going to do it. And follow me, Dad, follow me. And that was basically how it was then for the next, you know, few years. And my brothers as well, they were very much, what do we do? And I had no idea at the time, but I pretended like I did. You know, fake it till you make it, you know. This is what we're doing, this is how we're going to operate. And over the next few weeks, it was, you know, being down in Wellington together, organising the family to be down there, you know, all the logistics that go along with that, and your jobs and your, you know, partners and all the rest of it. And then a 24-hour watch over mum. And and being hyper vigilant and explaining to the boys everything that I was learning medically, because I was like studying for Africa. I was just going hard out, trying to understand and get up to speed on something that I was completely not, aware of prior to this, learning what an aneurysm does, what vasospasms are, what I'll be looking for, what the, signs. And we were only in the neurological unit. We weren't in the ICU, which looking back was like, what the hell? When she got down to Wellington, they did a straight into surgery. They started draining the blood off the brain. Right. And she started to, started to have that pressure released. But then we had to decide over the next couple of days, it had stopped bleeding at that point, but it was about to go at any time again. It could go at any moment. How do we clamp it? What do we do? Whether we cut into her brain and put a physical clamp over the area, and it was a massive aneurysm, like we're talking a 16 millimeter huge aneurysm, or we went up through the femoral artery, and we weighed up the pros and cons, and then you make that call. She's got a 50% chance of dying this way, she's got a 30% chance of dying that way, pretty much. So we'll take the lesser evil, but she was going to have 2 operations in that way, so that was going to be, it was, really touch and go, touch and go. And I remember them wheeling her off for that operation. I think it was on day 2, through the doors, and you just don't know if that's the last time you're going to see them alive, and the whole, just trying to hold your shit together.
So I know that you're very good at compartmentalizing parts of the, of something that when it happens. So what I remember you talking about when we were writing the book was how you were able to, put the jobs that needed to be done in that box, the research you were doing in this box, your family in that box, and probably, and I know this because we had phone calls and I was in touch with you at the time, your emotions and your shock and your trauma in this box. And it was a matter of kind of keeping, all those juggling balls in the air at one time, but also, and importantly, allowing you to have that emotional spot as well.
Yes.
And I know that you were very good at compartmentalizing and giving yourself time to do that, but not letting it overtake, or not letting you drop all the other balls at the time when you were dealing with the emotional side of it. And I think that that's really important, because I know, so when Lisa and I first met, I was a bit of a Lisa Tamati fangirl before we became friends, and I got to know you really well.
I didn't realise, I know.
Yeah, and I mean, we just saw you as Wonder Woman, this tough, athlete. And when I got to know you as, as a human being, of course, there's the vulnerable side to you, But what I think is really important in the time, in that immediate trauma time, is you gave yourself time to release a bit of that stress and that trauma by leaning on your husband, Hazley, by making phone calls to me. But also, like, I know that you went for some runs, went to the gym, thrashed it out. You probably screamed at the ocean at one point, down in Wellington. And that's also important, isn't it? It's not just
if you want to sustain, because we knew this was going to be a long battle. Well, we hoped it was going to be a long battle. A short option was, not a good one. And this is something that I learned doing ultra marathons, is to, in particular in the Libyan desert crossing, where you have to read the book for the whole story, but I did an expedition across the Libyan desert with 3 other guys, one of them being this abusive boyfriend that I was with at the time. And it was a very extreme situation that we were in. We only had 2 liters of water a day, etc. And I'm having this big domestics with the boyfriend, right? In the middle of the Libyan desert.
In the most extreme
environment.
On the planet,
Walking 45 kilometres a day with 35 kilo backpacks and only 2 litres of water a day in a military bard zone. Not a good time, Break up with a boyfriend in 5 years. And in that moment when he left me and disappeared over the sand dunes, that was a turning point for me. And I fell apart initially. And I was like, oh God, I started crying, and then I realized I can't afford to lose any more tears here. I've got to pull my shit together, because I cannot let the energy dissipate that out there if I want to actually survive, you know. And it was getting down to that sort of a level of, you know, are you going to survive this or not? And so I learned in that moment really a very hard lesson in compartmentalizing things in your brain. So like, I'm going to fall apart, but not right now. I'm going to put that off right now, because I have to focus on this and getting through the desert and surviving. And that's been actually a really good lesson. And it's never a pleasant one to actually have to instigate, where you have to actually compartmentalize. But in this situation where, you know, you're dealing with you're having to study like really hard out, and we have access now to the greatest minds on the world, and PubMed and all these information about out there that you can study. So I was studying all the drugs that they had on, all the procedures they were doing, what is the normal you know, plan of what happens when you have an aneurysm, what are some of the dangers, what are the things that I should be looking out for, what are the signs in your body, you know, all of these types of things in the initial phase. And then later on it went into rehabilitation research and study. And so that was one aspect of it. And then we had a 24-hour clock system, much to the disgust of the people at the hospital, because they didn't want us there 24 hours. They don't like that. And there was no way I was leaving my mother when she could die at any minute alone. No way. So I had massive battles with the hospital for them to be able to allow us in. And then, you know, having to fight for that. So you're fighting on all these fronts. You're already fighting, you know, with your, you know, your mum's in deep trouble, and then you're fighting against these systems, and they may have some good reasons for those systems, but there was no way I was leaving my mother alone when she could die any second. A family member had to be with her at all times. And I was very, very, you know, strict on that. And we had some big blow ups at the hospital, you know. We you know, got through really in the end. And we tried to be as unobtrusive as possible, and we did what we were, and we picked up things, man, that they missed, because she was on the neurological ward. They only come around a couple of hours and do obs, you know, do observations. But going back to the whole compartmentalizing things, I know how to manage my body really well, and how to pace myself really well from doing ultra marathons and stuff and expeditions. And so I knew that we were going to be in there for the long haul. I knew sleep deprivation was going to be a problem. I knew that the family dynamics were going to be a problem, that there was going to be fighting because of the stress levels that we were under, and we were all living in this one motel unit, you know. And that, you know, mum was, you know, in deep crap. We had my father to look after, who was just, you know.
And he was down with you in that initial stage, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. And he's a very much was a homebody, you know. He didn't like to be out of his garden in his shed. So he was very, very stressed on that front. And of course, his wife in such dire straits. He was, but we had to manage him, because he started having heart problems. And so I had to eventually actually send my dad back home, and actually lied to my dad that she's okay now. We've got it, Dad. She's all good. Because I feared that we were going to lose him. So, you know, it was making those sorts of decisions and just running the ship. So, and like you said, like, I know the importance of, for me especially, exercise and fresh air for my mental well-being, that if I was going to sustain it, I had to have at least half an hour to an hour every day out from this whole thing, where I just go and do a workout and get all the fear, the cortisol, the adrenaline that's running through my body flat stick, and try to manage it, and making sure that she was looked after in that time, you know. And you feel guilty and everything for leaving the hospital at all, but you had to do that after a few days. You know, the first couple of days I didn't, but after that. So it's setting all these things in place, and we need to do that in our daily lives. We need to set up systems and processes and understand our own bodies and how our bodies work, so that we can manage the stress levels, we can manage you know, the movement that we need, the sunshine, our needs for, you know, sleep and recovery and all of those aspects. And of course, in a situation like that, sleep deprivation was a massive,
huge.
And there's not much you can do about that. You know, you have to function at that level for as long as you have to.
And I think a lot of people that are in stressful situations, whether or not it be something like what happened with your mum, or even in work, and just in daily life, you know, big stressful moments, a lot of people put the self-care to the side, and they just think, well, I'm not, I don't have time for that, or I shouldn't have time for that.
Yes, the guilt.
And the guilt that kicks in, and yet it probably is one of the most important things to prioritize in terms of your day and compartmentalizing your day through to handle stressful situations, because it allows you to have the focus and the energy that you need to get back into the stressful
into
situation,
the fight,
to fight
the fight you're in. Yeah, absolutely. And you need to be able to have that energy put back in, and and it might only be 10 minutes out in the bloody, like when we had another situation which we'll probably get onto later with my dad, in his situation in the hospital for 16 days fighting for his life. It was sometimes 10 minutes in the waiting room doing press-ups. That was all I could get, before I went back into the battle zone, if you like.
Just to release that.
Yeah, just to manage the cortisol, I call it discharge and recharge, and then reset, come back into the moment. But yeah, it was sort of a heck of a lot of lessons to be learned, and then leading in a crisis situation. So like my brothers were amazing. They were very supportive, and they were like, followed everything that I asked them to do, basically. Because I'm the studier of the family. I'm the one that is into research and science and study, and so they trusted me to do all that thing, and they were like, well, you tell us what to do, we'll do it. And that's really great, because you've got your roles, that this is in having somebody lead the charge, so to speak. And even though you don't know what you're doing, where you're going, and this certainly in the rehabilitation, over the next years, because this process took years, having that person that's, got that responsibility, got that, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, I just need you guys to do this, that, and the other thing. And my whole entire family were willing to do that. They were, my dad was just, jumping ahead in time. My dad was just amazing how he stepped up to the mark, when he'd had a wife that had done everything for him pretty much.
And then suddenly he was, back when she came back to New Plymouth, he was cooking, and he was doing all the things.
Yeah. And it was a shocker for him, but he stepped up to the mark to the best of his ability. And he was the most wonderful, caring husband. He didn't give he didn't care that when she came back home for the first time, and we actually got her out of the hospital after 3 months, and I'm jumping ahead in time a bit, but he didn't care that she had no function, basically, that she was in a vegetative state, hardly. She was alive, and we were fighting, and that was all he needed to know. He had his wife at home. She was alive. She'd stabilized. We were fighting together, and we were on a mission. And every day he had his jobs to do and his things to do. And he was just relentless in his love for her, stepping up.
So going back to the moment where, so she's in Wellington, and you need to read the book to find out what went on in Wellington. The moment that she was transferred back to New Plymouth was a bittersweet moment, wasn't it?
Horrific.
Yeah, you were able to come home and be with Hazley and be back at home with the family and friends around that were helping, but you knew that the care that you would receive back in New Plymouth wasn't at the level that it would be in Wellington, basically just because Wellington is way more resourced than New Plymouth is, and fair enough. New Plymouth is a very small region. Taranaki here, we're a little provincial spot in New Zealand, so we knew that we wouldn't get the care that you got in the bigger city. So talk us through how it was like to come home and the things that you had to battle.
I was happy, for all those reasons, but at the same time, and I was happy that she's apparently stabilized, but like she was in ICU for the good part of say 2 of the 3 weeks that she was in Wellington, when she was in and out of coma. And once she'd gotten out of the coma, then they had to get the stent out of her head, and she kept dropping. What happens when you take the stent out is that the pressure can start rising in the brain again. And 3 times as they tried to take the stent out, the pressure went up. And on the 3rd time, they said, well, if it doesn't work this time, we're going to have to operate and put in a permanent one. And the 3rd time it worked, but it only, it worked for the next 24 hours. And then they were like, right, she's not, the pressure's not going up. She's keeping consciousness. She's not falling back into the coma. She's good to go. And I had researched. I knew that was not the case, that she could have that pressure could go up over the next 70 days at any point. And if that pressure went up, it would happen very quickly, and she could die. So I knew that even though they weren't telling me that she could still die in the next 70 days, and that if that happened in Wellington and the pressure started to go up, they might be able to recognise it. They might be able to go in and do something. They wouldn't be able to in New Plymouth. And so I was super hyper vigilant on trying to understand how I could notice if something in her consciousness was going down, right? And what I could do was to understand some of the symptomatic things that she might exhibit if that pressure is starting to go up, because she wouldn't be able to communicate it to me. You wouldn't be able to see it. She would just slowly lose more and more of her brain until it was, gone, basically. So that was a huge fear, bringing her home. And of course, putting her in an airplane with a pressure change. I didn't know what the heck that would do. In fact, it was nothing, but that wasn't a problem really. But at this time, you just like,
you don't know.
Yeah. For the next 70 days, I'm like hyper vigilant, and I, if I notice something down, I'll, be like, I think she's, doing this and doing that. And then they took her off the oxygen at the same time. And that was a big problem. They didn't see it as a problem. Her oxygen stats are all right. But what they were forgetting was that she was sleeping 18, 20 hours a day. So when she was asleep, she wasn't breathing properly. And I believe she had sleep apnea. So I said to them, I want a sleep apnea assessment. And they said, no, she doesn't need that. Why should she need that? Her oxygen stats are okay, when she's awake, so why would she, and I knew about sleep apnea. So I got a friend of ours who's actually a sleep apnea consultant, Jez Morris. And I said, come into the hospital illegally. Would you do that? He said, yeah, I'll do that. Or outside of the rules, I should say, not illegally, but, so we sneaked into the hospital at night time, put on these machines onto her, did an assessment overnight because it had to be an overnight thing, and we got the results, and it came back severe sleep apnea. Now, this is absolutely key. Like, her oxygen levels were down at 70% SpO2 stats. She was chain stoke breathing, which is not a good thing.
No.
Probably going to be on your way out in the next couple of months. And her oxygen was so low that she was knocking off any brain cells that she had. The infections that were in her body were just going apeshit. So bacteria was exploding, and that was actually one of the signs that I'd picked up, because I'd done a lot of racing at altitude, and I was seeing a lot of the signs in her that I'd had at altitude when I had altitude sickness and things like that. And so that was a first win, because then I had to convince the bloody staff that we needed to have the CPAP machine on her, and they weren't trained in CPAP machines, so they didn't want to do that. And I'm like, well, she needs it. She's got this. And, him being a sleep physiologist was able to convince them that, okay, this is a good thing for her. Now, and he said he'd been banging his head against the brick wall for a decade, trying to get, for stroke patients, an assessment done as part of the process, because very often this happens, that part of the brain is damaged in the stroke or the aneurysm, and even in things like concussions, that you can have a change in your breathing situation, and that part of the brain that monitors that is not working properly. So it should be a standard part of the thing, and that's what I believe, and that's what he believes. So anyway, we got the CPAP machine, and then she started to have little bits of improvement, but we were already 2 months, 3 months, 2.5 months or something into her time in the hospital, and we're running out of time. She's stable. She's nothing we can do with her, basically.
Mm.
She's pretty buggered. We've paid lip service to some physio and some speech therapy and stuff, and now it's time to get you out of the system. Yeah.
And I think at that point, I think they, you know, if you saw Isobel at that moment in the hospital, you would see an old woman who was, you know, probably on her way out. You didn't see, you know, you didn't see the vibrant person that we saw before the aneurysm that was so independent and so highly functioning. And so for the hospital, I think they just saw an older woman and a family that was another older woman and a family that wasn't willing to accept the fact that they had an aging mother. So there's that little, you know, that little bit of not understanding who she was before and how abrupt this change was. And we knew that if we could just get her back, even if it was a little bit back, that then you could take her home and start working. On rehab. Can you talk about how quickly they just wanted to move her into a home?
Oh yeah. So this is what happens very often when you're over 65. Is the answer is get them out of our budget into someone else's budget, and that means putting them into a hospital level care facility. And if you've got anything, that's the normal route that you go, and they will try and convince you of that route, at least in our situation. I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but we came up against a brick wall of this, especially the social worker who shall remain nameless, who just was totally against us being able to have the caregiver that I wanted, a caregiver in the morning for an hour and one in the evening for an hour, which is part of, they do provide this service and so on, but it costs more money and you stay in their budget.
Yes.
And that's the key point. So we were fighting over these resources, and what I want people to understand is you have to fight for the resources that you want for your loved one. And we have limited resources. That's a fact of life. And so if you want to get some of those resources and you think your loved one is worth that because they've spent their entire lives paying taxes, being good citizens, and have a right to have some of this, then you better be prepared for a fight, because that's what you're in for. And we did have a massive fight.
And it was interesting that, because as a family, you were willing to bring her home and you were willing to do a lot of the care yourself. You didn't want to be taking up a resource in a care facility. You were prepared to do that yourselves as a family at home. So in a sense, there's a lot of money to be saved.
Certainly now.
Because I know that how much you have given up and how much it cost the family to care for her at home. But that is what you wanted. And your family wanted, was to have her home. And I remember in the book you spoke about wanting Isobel to have familiar sights, smells, sounds around her to aid her in her rehab, and that in having those you felt that she was going to make more connections, neurological connection, quicker, because she was in her own home with her own people around her, with her own sights and sounds and smells around her. Can you talk a little bit about how positive you felt that was?
Yep, that's a huge piece of the puzzle. I had a friend's mum who actually worked in stroke rehabilitation, and she really encouraged me to do that and said how important this was, and it just made total sense to me. And I knew that when you are in the care of any facility, no matter how good they are, they can never provide the love and the attention that you can, because they've got other people and you're just another patient, and they provide a magnificent service and so on when this is absolutely necessary. But in this case, we had the willingness and the ability to do this. They said to me, the social worker said to me, there is no way in hell you are going to cope with her. She's 24/7 round the clock care, 2 people at all times. There is no way you're going to cope with her. And I actually came in and I threw my books on his table one day, across the table at him, and I said, read these. This is who I am and my family are, and we are not giving up without a fight. We may go down fighting, but we're going to go down fighting. We're not going to go down, and take the easy route out. It is not in our nature. And it's a fundamental difference between a family that is a fighting family and a family that isn't. And it's very much influenced by the people in power in these situations, the medical professionals, the people that are associated with all of that. And you have no confidence, to stand up against all these professionals. Usually they're the ones that have been to medical school. They're the ones that have been to whatever, social work, whatever the case may be. And you have a tendency to think, well, they know better than me. The one thing they don't know is you, and they don't know how strong you are. They don't know the resources that you have. They don't know your mentality, and they don't know really. They're all guessing as to what will actually happen based on their experiences. But that becomes partly a self-fulfilling prophecy. So when they say to you, like, there's no hope, no, that's their opinion that there's no hope.
Yeah.
And that I had time and time again, people telling me there is no hope. There is no hope. She's 74. Her brain damage is so massive. It cannot be that she would ever. And I was like, we'll see. I am only ever going to listen to the ones that tell me I can do, not the ones that I tell me I can't do. And they may be right. I'm not saying they're not right, but I'm going to throw the book at this. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And if it's all about attitude and effort and grinding it out, then I'll take that one any day. I'll take that option. I'm a fighter. I'm a worker, and my family is too. And we're not going to go down without a fight. And I saw lots of other families going through the same process, because this thing's happening in every day in every hospital around the world, right? And it is very much, well, statistically, this person's not a good bet.
Yeah.
And therefore, we'll just do the standard of, we'll do the standard of care. We'll do the humane thing. We'll do all this, the tick all the boxes. We'll do it all right, but. The anomaly cases, the cases like Mum's, like why is nobody coming to say to me, and I'm out there telling everybody this story, and that's why I've written the book, is to empower other people in these types of situations, even different ones. But why is nobody asking me, well, what did you do?
What did you do to get her to where she is?
They believe, when they see Mum now, you guys have, seen Mum here today, talking and walking and going off for coffee and driving up to see her friends, and you would have no idea that she ever had anything.
No.
She's completely normal again. And but I was told that was an impossibility. And how many people are told you have a terminal illness? You are going to die of this thing. When you plant this sort of stuff, they're making like educated guesses based on the statistics of the past, whatever, and their experiences. And I get that. And we can't give people false hope, but we also can't take away all hope.
No, it's a really powerful message, I think. I was talking to a friend of mine who is battling with cancer at the moment, and she has the most amazing mindset. Her mindset, so she's she was told she had 3 months to live. That was I think 6 months ago. And her mindset, and she's just been through some chemo, and the tumors have shrunk. Her mindset basically is that cancer is not welcome back. It's just not. I'm going off to live my life, and if I die of it, well, okay, I die of it, but in the meantime, I'm living my life, and it's not welcome back. And she is charging in life, and sure, she has her rough days. I really love how you said, there's a responsibility for them not to give false hope, but at the same time, not to take away. Similar situation with my father. He has myeloma, so cancer of the blood. And I think at the time the doctors, said, after this treatment you have between 5 and 15. And he immediately said, I'll take the 15, thanks. Because that puts him at the point that would have taken him to 85. And he was quite happy with that, because at the time he was 69. And I love that, and we're 6 years down now. So I think mindset is huge. And the way that you approach things, because sure, we might, I might die by being run over by a bus today. But if if you don't live life thinking that things are going to get better, that you have the power to have control over your health and your well-being,
Yep.
and the way that you deal with these traumas, if you don't have that mindset,
You're definitely not going to.
then you're definitely not. You're going to roll up in a corner.
Yeah.
As my friend with cancer said when she went to hospital, she's like, oh, I'm surrounded by all these sick people, which I love, because she didn't see herself in that.
And that's one of the
didn't
reasons I
want
take mum to the gym every day.
Exactly.
I didn't take her, you know, we did go to the physio program at the hospital. Don't get me started on that.
No,
But it was dreadful. It was shocking. The stories in the book, if you want to read that one, that is a real bad one. But I like her to be surrounded by athletes going for it, because that rubs off on her. She's not a patient, she's an athlete. And she's training for her Olympics, and that is the attitude we take every single day. And I make no concessions that she is not 79 years old and, oh, isn't it time for her to relax? No, it isn't time for her to relax. It's time for her to work harder. It's time to go harder. And the older you get, the more effort you have to put into this, if you want to stay alive. That is the key. When you stop wanting to be alive, then sit on the couch and do nothing, because that's what will lead to. If you still want to be alive and enjoy life, then you have to fight for it. And this goes whether you're bloody 10 years old or 95 years old or 105 years old. If you give in to the easy way, if you go, I don't feel like training today. Like, I don't feel like training most days. But most days I train. Because it keeps me healthy, fit, and I'm being preventative. And that's what I'm all about now, is being in the prevention space and then helping people who are in dire need navigate the waters of this, and connecting people to the right doctors and the right studies and the right information and the right books and all of that sort of jazz.
When I was in the depths of my training for a marathon, I remember that exact conversation with a friend, and she said, I can't, at the end of the day I'd go off and run 10k, and she's like, but you've just worked a full day. And I'm like, and I'm tired, but I'm going to go do it, because you never regret it when you finish it.
Yes.
At the end of that 10Ks, you've never thought, I really shouldn't have gone for that run. You don't. You come back thinking that was awesome.
And you feel better, generally.
You feel better. Sure, you're tired, or, but you were tired before you went out for the run. So you actually end up more energized.
You end up more energized. Your cortisol level
you might be
down,
still, your muscles might be tired, but you're energized.
And you're getting stronger.
I think that's a really good message, is that you don't regret it once you get out. It's always just those first 5 minutes, or I always used to say the first 4K of any run was always a bit
the first
tough, wasn't it?
20 minutes is
like,
just shit.
Yeah, it is.
Especially if you don't warm up properly. And it's still the same for me. And if I warm up properly, then it's less shit,
Yes,
And if I'm in a hurry and I run out the door and I don't, then it's going to be more shit. Warm-ups are really key.
The more experience you have with training, or with whatever it is that you're doing for self-care, understanding that the first little bit is always tough. And the more that you experience that, the more you know it, to expect it, and then that you're going to get the buzz at the end. And start looking forward to that.
I had that conversation with my brother yesterday, because I've been telling him he's very fit. He does he's amazing built. He does weight training. He's a surfer, and he surfs sometimes 6 hours a day, but he doesn't do cardio. And I monitor his bloods and his health and his everything. And you've got to do some cardio. We've got some issues here. We need some cardio, please. And he's like, I hate cardio. I don't want to do cardio. And then he will do 5 minutes, and he's like, I don't want it. And I said to him, it's about pushing through that barrier. It's the same as if you tell me, why aren't you going surfing anymore? And I'm like, because it's so hard and I don't want to get hit by the waves and get smashed around. And he's like, what are you talking about? It's awesome. And I said, it's awesome because you've gotten through that barrier. pushed enough, long enough to get through that, and I'm having to go through that. And it's always that initial, adaptation phase, that time when you're not fit and you're not good at the surfing or the running or the whatever, when it's, shit, let's be honest. But if you hang in there long enough, if you stay with the tension long enough, then you'll start to make the adaptations, and then you'll start to actually like it, and then you'll start to enjoy it, and then it will become like, wow, I'm actually into this. And you'll still have your days where you don't want to do it. And those are the days when you have to just take action, a small piece of action, and I'll put my running shoes on, or I'll go to the letterbox and I'll see, or I'll just do 20 squats and that, and 10 press ups, and then I'll just stop at that. And then you do those, and then you're like, oh, now I've got my motivation.
I'm out here.
Yeah, I'm out. I'll do a couple more minutes, and then next minute you've run for an hour or something.
And I think that's why Relentless is such a good title for the book, because it's not just about your mum's story. It's about the process of taking those small actions, and how those small actions all build up and all add together to make a big impact, a big solution. And so what I probably, again, going back to the fangirl in me, this isn't a story about Lisa Wonder Woman who can do everything, because she can't. She has vulnerabilities, and she has rough days, and she has days where friends need to pick her up. But what you've done with your mum, and what you can learn by reading the book, is how those small actions actually build up and accumulate. And that is relentless. That's what it means to be relentless. It doesn't mean that we should all run a marathon or an ultra marathon, or that's the journey that most people should take. That's not what we are saying here. But it's about how, if you have some self-care and take those small steps, whatever that may look like for you at the time of your life, that you are living a life that is relentless.
I love it. And
it'll be way more powerful, more fulfilling, and you'll last longer.
You'll last longer. Who wouldn't want that? And you'll last longer healthily, rather than, it's all about, for me, it's about health span as well. You don't want to be living in a horrific state of affairs and, barely alive, but still kicking. That's not living. So we want to push that degeneration out for as long as possible. And the exciting thing, what I'm excited about, because I study this stuff obsessively, is the stuff that's coming down the pipeline in regards to longevity and anti-aging. I'm like, Mum, if I can keep you alive for another 10 years, then the technology is going to keep you alive for a lot longer. The advances in medicine, the advances in science are going to be, mean that you could possibly live for a hell of a lot longer. And if I can hold my 52-year-old body together now, by the time I get to my 60s, there are going to be things that are probably going to mean that we're going to live to, they're talking 150 and beyond, whether I'll see that or not, but my children might, or, our little ones in this next generation might, and we may, who knows, because things are changing so rapidly. And that's why I'm cutting edge on the latest and greatest stuff. I love shiny objects. And I love doing the research and staying across all that and maintaining, so that I can actually get to hopefully enjoy the benefits of that and not have something major happen out of the blue. Because most of these things that come at us, the big four, the cancer, the cardiovascular diseases and strokes, and the diabetes and the Alzheimer's, if you take just those, they are predictable a long way out. If I had known more about things, then Mum's aneurysm was bloody written on the cards, Her dad died at 52. Now, I've done our genetics, and I have it too, a very poor lining of our blood vessels. Our glycocalyx is very, very poor quality, which means we're more prone to strokes and aneurysms and stuff. So now I know that, so now I can do something preventative about it. I didn't know that when Mum went down, and she was always struggling with her weight and always, having problems with that. Now we've cracked that code. She's tiny now. She's very slim, and she's lost 35 kilos, and we've cracked the code on it. But hey, it's taken me bloody years to work that out for her now. But we have that science now. We have that epigenetics and all the genetic testing. We have all that available to us, And yes, it all costs, and people go, I couldn't afford this. And I
can't afford not to.
Yes, can you afford not to? And yes, I mean, this stuff costs money. All this stuff costs money. To keep mum going cost me over a couple of grand a month. But I would, like, instead of having a fancy car,
Yeah,
I got a fancy mum.
love that.
Like it is, like if you don't have anything, well then you can do the stuff that you can give for free, which is exercise, which is not eating bad shit and eating right and things. But if you have got a little bit of resources, where are you putting it?
Yeah.
Are you doing it, for me, superfluous things like, I don't go and have facials and massages. Well, massages would be actually healthy, but so I probably shouldn't lump that in with it. But,
you
really
don't buy a lot of shoes.
No, I don't. I don't have fancy clothes. I wear the same thing all the time. But I spend it on stuff that might keep us alive longer, if that makes sense.
When I was going through some rough health over a year ago, I talked with Lisa and we booked in, a whole raft of tests. And I think it was probably just over $1,000, to get a really good picture of where things are. And sure, that's a lot of money. But the fact was, my health was bad enough that I wasn't coping.
Yeah.
I wasn't coping.
It's more expensive.
Or work. So, for me to be able to earn an income, for me to be able to be a functioning adult, that can walk happily and healthily through the world. I had to invest in that, and I think that sometimes we can feel guilty at investing in those kind of things, especially if you're a mum or if you have other commitments. But the fact is that if you need to be around for your kids, or in my case for my class, I'm a teacher, so if I need to be there 100%, then I need to be at 100%, and so that
so it's chicken and egg. You lose your job if you're not healthy.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you lose your job, then you're not going to be able to stay healthy.
No.
So it's a chicken and egg scenario, and I'd rather invest in those things and prioritize those things.
Get onto them first before they become something major later.
Yeah. And you can't see everything coming. The journey that I've been on with my dad, and he unfortunately passed away in July last year after one hell of a battle. And I didn't see that one coming. He was, I had him, but Dad did one thing that I could never stop him doing, and that was smoking. And that's what basically got him in the end. And that's addiction, and I'm just sad about that. But you can't, and I spend a lot of time studying. I study hours every day so that I'm not caught short, and since losing Dad, even more so. But I realize I can't know everything, and that there will be curveballs that come at me anyway, but I can be as prepared as I can be, and then I can react in the situations the best I can, and I can at least know where to go to get help. I know where to go if I have something, if I have something tomorrow, I'll probably find out who the heck to talk to very quickly.
Exactly.
To deal with it, and that's a good resource to have.
So in Relentless, in our book at the back is a bunch of resources. We've listed them out. And Lisa said something really funny to me the other day. She got some feedback from a bloke that read the book, and he said, I normally would have never read a book with two chicks on the cover. It was hilarious, but and then he said, but it was a rocking good book. He said it was a really good book.
Yeah.
He read it through, and also it provided it has so much information in here, and I thought that was interesting because the process, of course, of getting the book published and choosing the cover and everything was quite a major, wasn't it? And
we obviously made a mistake on some of the areas.
There were mistakes made, and hopefully some things fixed. But I thought it was worth kind of pointing out that it's not just the story about your mum, but in there is a bunch of lessons and resources that you can apply to any situation that involves either health or stress. Big
mindset,
big moments that require that positive mindset, and real strategies in there about what it takes to survive trauma and stressful situations that can apply to health or work or relationships or all sorts. So I just thought, I kind of do that little promotional push. When we went to do our book launches, we had all booked them up, hadn't we? We were going
Yeah, right through the country.
And then
Then
lockdown.
COVID, the day after.
The day after. Fantastic.
Day
We
after
managed
we
to
launched.
squeak one in, which was our
Yep.
hometown,
Which was
our
awesome.
hometown book launch, which was fantastic. But unfortunately, we couldn't do the big push. So as your co-author, because I know Lisa touts this book any chance she can, but as the co-author of it, I'd like to, recommend that everyone does get a copy, has a read of it, and really gains from, really can get some benefit from reading the resources and the steps and the strategies that are in there.
Yeah, thanks, Kush. Because it is. It's not a book just for ladies. It's not a book just for runners. It's not a book for just people with brain injuries. It's for all of the above. Plus, it is people who have taken on massive challenges and who are up against it. It's for people who want to understand what it takes to succeed, or want to understand what it takes to take on massive challenges and have a chance at actually coming out the other end. And it is a coaching book, basically. It's written in a story form, but there is a lot of learnings in there, and there's also a lot about a lot of the therapies and the doctors and the podcasts and the books and the resources that I used in order to rehabilitate my mum. And then this is the whole point of the podcast now that we've been doing, pushing the limits for 5.5 years. I actually started it before mum had her aneurysm, but it became one of the greatest resources for me personally, because I got to get the world's greatest scientists and doctors and the latest research and to share that with everybody. And whether it was around health and fitness and running or mindset or high performance or longevity or anti-aging or any of those things, it was all relevant for me. And it was, partly a selfish endeavor because it did help me in that whole process. And we're very passionate about the show, and we'd love anybody who isn't already subscribed to Pushing the Limits as a podcast to make sure you head on over to iTunes or wherever you listen and subscribe to the show, because we really get world-leading experts up on there every single week. It's pretty fantastic and a great resource. Oh, Kush, you've been marvellous today, mate, as always. And we're working on another book.
Yes,
we're going to start working. We haven't started yet. We've discussed next steps. So she's a very brave woman, because I tell you, she went to hell back with me on this book.
Look, the journey has been an absolute privilege to be a part of this, the book, and also to be a part of your lives. And it's interesting. I've never written a book before, so I just like to put that out there, that sometimes you have to do brave and scary things just to see what you're capable of. And what we really hope with this is that people get a lot out of it. It's a great read. There's some comedy in there as well, good moments, as well as the hard stuff. And I think that's what I've learned as being part of this journey is, life's about putting yourself out there. Do the things that are scary, but that you've always potentially had in the back of your mind you wanted to do.
Absolutely. And you with your masters in English, that was a good place to start for a start. It's
been a few years since I'd written, but
and it's fabulous. And it's now made the emphasis for you to write your own novel, which is fantastic. So that's what happens when you step outside your comfort zone. I'm very much good at pushing Kushla outside her comfort zone.
Yes. Lots of stories about runs there as well.
Oh yeah. Lots of adventures along the way. Yeah, I haven't killed you yet, so it's
not yet. No,
still been good. Kushla, thank you so much for your time today and being the interviewer and being co-author on this marvelous book. And